occasion, we ask your divine guidance, instill within us and our leaders the wisdom and the knowledge and the courage. And may everything that's done in this assemblage benefit our state, benefit our citizens. And we ask you to continue to have your hand upon us and guide us. We request this to you in the name of your Son and our Lord Jesus Christ. Amen.
Amen. Amen. Thank you. Well, this is the beginning of the first session of the term. And so what I like to do when we start off is introduce ourselves and give our members an opportunity to introduce themselves. Michelle Sloan, we have the committee rules, however, they were not in the folder. So they're getting the rules to bring to them. Those who have been members of this committee, our one change was to change the date from 2013-14 to 2015-16. But we'll pause at some point, look at those and take a vote. But let's go ahead and get started. And so I've got two people who work with our committee at my left. And so Kevin Cox. Kevin, just punch your button and tell us where you're in college and give us that information. 13?
I'm from Georgia College and State University down in Milledgeville, and I'm working for Representative Lynn Smith and Representative McCall here, and I'm having a great time this session so far.
There's plenty of time to change that. And Jeremy, he's our lead counsel, and so we all know him and his role. Thank you for being here. Appreciate all your work. And number 17.
Brooks Coleman, District 97, which is Duluth, Gwinnett County, Duluth, Suwannee, Sugar Hill. This is my 23rd year serving on this committee. I love it. I'm really enjoying it, and one day I'm going to become a hunter. I'd like to fish, but not hunt yet.
My only comment is we are usually the ones hunted. Okay.
Yeah. Good morning, Jeff Jones. I'm a freshman representative from District 167, I live on the coast, representing North Glenn County, all of McIntosh and Long counties.
Thank you. Well, hold on just a minute.
I'm Jan Tankersley. I represent House District 160, and that's most of Bullock County and North Bryan. This is my 5th year in the Georgia General Assembly, but actually my 20th year in politics, previously in city and county.
Thank you. Brian Groom.
I'm Brian Groom, House Budget and Research Office. I work on this committee as well as Game, Fish, and Parks, and on the budget side with the Public Safety Subcommittee.
He's the guy behind the scenes who gets everything done for us, so, plus the staff. Let's see.
Buddy Harden, District 148. That's Crisp, Wilcox, Pulaski, and Houston counties, and I appreciate the opportunity to serve on this committee because of the folks in DNR and EPD are good to work with, and a lot of those folks here this morning we're going to hear from.
Thank you.
All right. I'm Bubba Epps, House District 144, which includes all of Twiggs, Wilson, and Bleckley counties, and in parts of Jones, Bibb, Houston, and Lawrence. And I would like to say that District 144 includes a lot of Commissioner Williams's properties and assets to our hunters and sportsmen in the state, and we're proud to not only work with him, but people from that district.
Thank you.
Chuck Williams, House District 119, most of Oconee and Clark counties. It's an honor and privilege to serve, Madam Chair.
Thank you.
Sam Watson, House District 172 from South Georgia, parts of Colquitt, Tift, and Thomas counties.
Thank you. 26? Go ahead. 27. I didn't say last, I said next.
John Corbett, District 174, which represents South Lowndes, Eccles Clinch, part of Ware, most of Charlton, and a little bit of Camden.
Thank you. Chairman McCall?
Tom McCall, representing Madison, Elbert, Wilkes, Lincoln, and Columbia. And Brooks, this is my 21st year on this committee. And I'm like you, I don't do much hunting, but I do a heap of killing.
I don't know if he means bills or livestock. So Representative Geisinger, you're 12?
Thank you. I was here on time,
Yes.
Madam Chair. But it said 6:06. I guess I didn't get the notice. There's always 10% that don't get the notice. Roswell, Georgia, and pleased to be here.
Thank you.
I'm State Representative Pat Gardner from the City of Atlanta. Proud to have Commissioner Williams as my constituent. We don't do much hunting in his new district. I just wondered where the definition, I love this new brochure that you've created, but there's no explanation of what is rested and not rested vegetation.
And we really think that word came from a neighboring state. So anyway, number 5.
Yes, I'm Randy Nix. I represent Troop Herd in Carroll County. It's got a big part of the Chattahoochee. Actually live on the Chattahoochee down there, so I see you guys around a pretty good little bit. But you're never there when I need you, when that airboat comes through at 1 o'clock in the morning.
You can thank Coweta County for sending the airboat your way, because it's just going to move on down the river, right? Okay, thank you.
Well, it seems like it's going fast, but you hear it for about an hour. Your windows rattle for an hour.
Okay.
Representative Kevin Tanner, District 9, Dawson, Lumpkin, and part of Forsyth County have Lake Lanier, Dawson Forest Wildlife Management Area, and some of the best fishing and hunting in the state, and appreciate what DNR does for us.
Dan Gasaway, House District 28, which is Banks, Habersham, and Stevens County, which is Cholula Gorge all the way to Lake Hartwell, and then over toward Hall County.
Thank you.
Hi, I'm Debbie Buckner, and I represent all of Talbot County, part of Harris, part of Meriwether, and part of Muskogee. And my district lies between the Flint and the Chattahoochee.
Thank you. To those who are listening to these introductions, I think one of the things you can tell is that your legislators are really from all over the state. And I think that's very important when we deal with the policy decisions here. So often our debates don't center on whatever your partisan position is, but actually where you live. And we try to be the voice for our constituents, but at the same time, just to reaffirm this, we take the oath of office to look after our state. Thank you. And then tell us where you're going to take us hunting, fishing, and introduce your committee to us. This is your show until we might pause at some point to take a committee action on the rules. we're going to work for a second on the mics to be sure that they're in order.
All right. Thank you, Commissioner, and good morning, everybody. It's a pleasure to be here. As Commissioner said, you've got lots of material in your folder, and I just want to hit a couple of high points of that content as it relates to the Coastal Resources Division. We are the second smallest division within the department. We have approximately 60 employees, but we have a very diverse mission, and oftentimes I sort of describe us as being part Wildlife Resource Division, part Environmental Protection Division, and part Department of Community Affairs, because we do dabble in a lot of different things. Our primary organizational structure is around three focus areas, which is the Georgia Coastal Management Program, administering the Coastal Marshland Protection Act and the Shore Protection Act, as well as being responsible for overseeing the leases of coastal marshlands and tidal water bottoms for private uses, and then also fishing, which is a big part of the coastal lifestyle in our economy. The coast of Georgia is a very unique environment. Even though we only have 100 linear miles of coast from Savannah to St. Mary's, within that 100 linear miles of coast is about 500,000 acres of estuaries, which comprises about a third of the intact salt marsh left along the eastern seaboard. And so we have animals, terrestrial, aquatic, and all that come and go out of the Georgia coast, back and forth along the Atlantic coast, all the way from the Canadian Maritimes down into the Bahamas and even across the Atlantic Ocean. So it's small but very important in the ecology of the globe, as well as the economy of the state. You know, tourism is about $2 billion in our coastal economy. Fishing is about $500 million of that. We've got 2 deep water ports that are natural features that have been amplified by man's activities to provide a very important economic engine for the coast. And then we've got a lot of history. And as we all know, Georgia started on the coast and then branched out inland from the founding fathers in Savannah. So it's a very culturally and ecologically rich environment. And our job is to try to balance the inevitable expansion of humans into that environment, but to protect those cultural and ecological resources so we can continue to benefit from them. One thing I do want to point out is that we are about 70% federally funded, so we only get about 30% of our annual operating budget comes from state appropriated funds. We get federal money from a variety of sources. Some of it is discretionary, some of it is obligated through trust funds. But that speaks to the fact that we are part of a vibrant coastal environment in the United States. And so we do a lot to represent the interest of the state of Georgia outside of the boundaries of the state of Georgia, through interstate fishery management compacts, through the federal fishery management process, through collaborations with other states, to make sure that we're not operating in a vacuum, and that what we do is complementary to the actions of other coastal states, and that what they're doing is hopefully in the best interest of the state of Georgia. So with that, I'll be glad to entertain any questions you might have.
We're going to take our questions at the end because we want to be sure we can get through our committee. So just go fishing and we'll call for you.
Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you.
This time I'll call up Dan Forrester, who heads up our Wildlife Resources Division, which is located in Social Circle.
Thank you, Commissioner and Madam Chair. It's a pleasure also for me to be here. And in the few minutes I have, I am going to refer to a couple documents that you have in your binder. One is a strategic plan for the Wildlife Resource Division, which kind of gives you an idea of some of the priorities that we're working on. But also there's a 2-page fact sheet that has lots of details about the breadth of what we cover in terms of facilities, operations, impact, and that kind of thing. But before I go there, I really want to talk more about why we're here than what we do. And that is simply the fact that this great country was founded on a principle that Europeans aren't accustomed to having, and that is that the wildlife resources, fisheries, game, non-game, are actually held in public trust by the state and the federal government. The federal government holds trust responsibilities for things that are migratory, but by and large, 90+% of the wildlife and fisheries resources that we enjoy in this state are a public trust resources that is in the responsibility of the government. And the Wildlife Resource Division is one of the principal trustees to manage those resources. And we do so through a combination of legislative actions and regulatory actions, policies, and funding. And so it's that premise for which we manage the resources. And it's also important to know that probably the oldest written conservation law in our history actually comes from Mosaic law, which is in Deuteronomy, and it says, if thou come across the bird on the nest, okay, you can take the young but leave the dam so she may prolong us the days. And I bring that to bear because that is the law of conservation use, of wise use. And that too is the premise from which we operate. The resources here are a benefit to us, and we use them. We manage the game species we have. We manage the fisheries resources for the benefit of the public with the mindset that we have the responsibility as trustees to protect these things into the future. We do that with about 400 employees. We manage about 1 million acres in the state for public hunting. Only about half, a little less than half of that which we own. The rest is through partnerships. We have 10 public fishing areas, 10 fish hatcheries, 144 boat ramps, number of shooting ranges, archery ranges, and education facilities. So we touch basically every part of this state. Our constituencies represent about 1 million anglers and about 400,000 hunters, and the impact to the economy of this state is magnanimous. Just hunters and anglers alone spend $6.3 million direct expenditures every day out of their pocket. And when you add in bird watching and others, you add another $2 million of that. So the state and local taxes generate about $216 million a year for the state. And our funding comes primarily from hunters and anglers. There's a chart in there that shows our budget, and we spent in FY14 about $57 million. Only 6% of that is actually general state revenues that we glean from sources other than license revenue. So hunting and fishing license revenue supports about 90% of the conservation effort in this state, coupled with the federal excise taxes on hunting equipment and fishing equipment. So a big chunk of our budget, 52%, is federal funding, but that is a grant program based on the excise taxes that hunters and anglers and shooters pay. They're not general tax revenue. So we've got a strong foundation. The one challenge we have is all these other things that aren't hunted or fished have pressures on them. And we currently have about 65 endangered federally listed species in the state, but there's over 100 in the queue to be considered for federal listing. And so we're working very hard on what I call proactive conservation, trying to position ourselves with sound science to keep some of those things from being listed where we can, because our science isn't nearly as mature as they are with such things as deer or turkeys or largemouth bass. Some of these species we have in the state, there's only a couple people on our staff can even identify, and we don't know basic life history. So we're spending a lot of time working on those, and appreciate your support in that effort. And of course, that takes money, and appreciate your support there as well. So with that, I think I'll stop my comments and look forward to any questions that might ensue.
Thank you very much. And to my committee, if in between each one of our speakers, if you'll be looking over the rules, to those who came a little bit after we opened our meeting, the only change is the date change. We haven't changed any of the rules, but we did go to 2015-16, and after the next presenter, I'll ask for action by the committee.
Thank you, Madam Chair. The next presenter is Dr. Dave Crass, who runs our Historic Preservation Division, which is our smallest division, but they do very important work. Dr. Crass.
Thank you, Madam Chair. We're basically mandated by the federal government to set historic preservation priorities for the entire state. We do that through a 5-year planning process in concert with local communities across the state. I like to say that HPD has the broadest range of responsibilities relative to the size of our budget of any of our divisions. We have about a $3.1 million budget. Half of that is federal through the National Park Service. The other half comes through state appropriation. I'd like to just touch on our 7 major program areas. Most of you have probably heard of the National Register of Historic Places. This is what I call a keystone program for our division. Virtually every other thing that we do touches on the National Register in some way. There's a very intensive vetting process to get a property listed on the National Register. It takes place at the state level and then at the National Park Service level. But getting listed on the National Register makes a historic building eligible for all kinds of technical assistance, and most importantly, for federal and state tax incentives for the rehabilitation of that building so that it can be put back into serviceable use. And I'll talk about those state and federal tax incentive programs in a moment. We also have something called Section 106 review. This is one of our federally mandated responsibilities. Every federal activity in the state of Georgia that may impact historic resources is supposed to be reviewed by our office. That goes everything from cell tower applications through the FCC all the way up to and including the Savannah Harbor deepening, which is a project I've been deeply involved with for about 16 years now. There's a shipwreck perched right on the edge of the channel down there, and as we speak, the U.S. Navy, the Corps of Engineers, in concert with our office, is developing a plan to lift the most important sections of that shipwreck. They'll go out to Texas A&M for conservation, and then they'll eventually come back to Savannah to become part of the thriving heritage tourism industry in that city. We review about 1,500 of these projects a year. They're critical to economic development, and I'm very, very proud of our office's record. We have one of the fastest turnaround times in the country in terms of how fast we get these federal projects reviewed and out the door. I mentioned our state and federal tax incentive programs. These are an economic development tool used by communities all across the state. Basically what they do is offer income tax credits for the rehabilitation of historic buildings. Our sort of flagship project right now is Ponce City Market. Some of you are familiar with that over on West Ponce de Leon. $200 million plus project, very, very successful. And it has really led to a renaissance of the old Fourth Ward and Ponce Highlands area. But we also have tax projects that are what we call mom and pops, individual homeowners all across the state that take advantage of those programs. Our office also houses the Office of the State Archaeologist. Most of the duties connected with that position are relative to management of sensitive archaeological sites on state lands. We work very closely with regional and national level universities to investigate those sites and manage them for scientists to have in the future. And I invite any of you who are interested in one of those, or who are interested in archaeology, to get in touch with me, because we normally have a couple of different projects going on during the summer, and they're really quite interesting to visit. Our office was the first state historic preservation office in the nation to have an African American heritage preservation program. We're still considered a national leader in that area. And Jeannie Syriac on my staff travels around the state working with African American communities to identify historic buildings that are important to them and put them back into productive use. We administer something called the Centennial Farms Program. This is a program that recognizes farms that have been in the same family for 100 years or more. There is a vetting process that takes place in our office, an application process that these farm owners go through. And then we have an annual award ceremony at the opening day of the State Fair down in Perry. It's really quite a lot of fun, and we're getting ready to stand up a website that has all of the application information that we've developed over the years with these family farmers, and we work quite closely with the Department of Agriculture on that. Our last program is called the Certified Local Government Program, and this is one of our most popular program areas. It is a partnership between the National Park Service, our office, and local jurisdictions. In order to become a CLG, a community has to pass a historic preservation ordinance, impanel a commission to administer that ordinance, and designate at least one local historic district. That gives that community access to a federal grant program as well as technical expertise, but the biggest benefit of the CLG program is that it gives local communities control over their historic downtowns. It's all about local control. Georgia has the third most active CLG program in the country. We have 89 communities that are CLGs, and these include Atlanta, Avondale Estates, Brunswick, Columbus, Cordele, Elberton, LaGrange, Moultrie, and Roswell. All of those are very active CLG communities, and we tend to work very closely with those CLGs. Thank you.
Thank you.
Next, I'll have Becky Kelly, our Director of Parks and Recreation Historic Sites.
And so as you're taking your seat, we're going to pause for a minute, and I'm going to ask my committee to review the the rules. I have some flashing lights. Number 12, Representative McCall, I think. What number is yours? 12 down there. All right, Representative Geisinger.
Madam Chair, having reviewed the minutes, I move that we adopt these minutes as written.
And I hear a second. Any further discussion? All those in favor signify by aye. Aye. Any opposed, nay. Thank you. Thank you for letting us conduct our business here. So y'all are official now. Thank you.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I'm Becky Kelly. I'm the Director of the Parks and Historic Sites Division. Very glad to be with you this morning to talk about our state parks for just a moment. We have quite a few pieces of material in your packet that I hope you'll have an opportunity to view, but if you take a moment to pull the back sheet out for Parks and Historic Sites, I'd like to just cover a few of those highlights because that'll give you a pretty good snapshot of what we do and where we are and where we hope to go with our wonderful state parks. We oversee about 80,000 acres with our partners. We have been in existence for 84 years. We'll be celebrating our 85th anniversary next year. And what we have been doing for the last few years, as many of you know that have been involved with the economic situation that we've all been challenged with, is that our state parks have transformed ourselves to position us to be more financially stable, more engaged in our local community, and more focused on providing opportunities in the future for our state and generations to come. We have been in a focused transition state for a number of years and made a number of adjustments that we've highlighted on the fact sheet. The chart at the bottom on that fact sheet indicates that we bring about $561 million worth of economic impact to our local communities and to our state. And with our visitation, as we continue to press to increase the visitation, we are going to be increasing that economic impact, as many of you know that have parks and historic sites in your districts. So we've been working very hard. On the second page, or the back page of that, talks about our strategic goals going forward. What we've learned for the past few years is that we have a number of parks in our site and a couple of historic sites that are generating well over 100% of their operating costs. On the flip side of that, we have a number of sites that will never be able to do that. They're historic, they require maintenance and care and stewardship, or the facilities are just not going to be able to generate their own revenue. But as a division, we cover 62% of our entire operating cost with our revenue generation outside of the appropriation. And we're continuing to press forward with that so that we can be as sustainable as we can in the future, but recognizing as we're moving in that direction, we also have stewardship responsibilities. We have priceless, wonderful assets, both from a natural, cultural, and recreational perspective, that we're working through our strategic goals to make sure that we're taking care of for your children, their children, and the children ahead. So we've identified our focus. We're going to be looking at many of our flagship sites. We're going to be looking at those natural and cultural resources that really need our care and attention moving forward. And we're going to be working with our local communities and partners to engage in great conversations about how we can do our work our park systems even better. One of the things that I did want to point out that many of you are also aware of, in addition to running the state park system, we administer 2 federal grant programs, and I'm sure you might have heard from some of your city and county
leaders about the Land and Water Conservation Fund and the Recreation Trail Grant Program. These are two programs that are federally funded. Both of those programs are in the crosshairs in Congress right now because of the challenges with their funding, but these are important assets to our local communities and to our state. So I call your attention to that. Know that we're going through grant cycles right now on the recreation trails, and we look forward to being able to put some money into the local communities to connect our great assets through trails and parks. So with that, I'll pause and look forward to any questions you might have.
Thank you.
And our last division, I'll call on Colonel Eddie Henderson from Law Enforcement.
Thank you, Commissioner, Madam Chair, committee members. Thanks for the opportunity to be here this morning. Our mission overall is to support the other divisions, and we do that through our law enforcement efforts to conserve our natural resources and protect the people that we serve. Our law enforcement division sets us up as the oldest state law enforcement agency in the state of Georgia. The first game wardens were appointed in 1911. So this year, 104 years that basically game wardens have been around. You know, we're officially called conservation rangers, but most everybody calls us a game warden. To us, that's sort of a term of endearment.
Some it's not.
Yeah. Our game wardens, our conservation rangers are post-certified officers. They have full police powers, and that gets us into a lot of different activities that I'll sort of touch on. It takes 42 weeks for an officer to be completely trained, to be able to be out on their own and working, and that's because of the breadth of what we do. We support all of our other divisions and the needs that they see from an enforcement standpoint. Our core mission is to enforce hunting, boating, fishing, environmental, which is basically what we look at as the littering and waste control part of that, and enforce other state and laws and regulations that are assigned to our department. We also enforce the fishing industry rules, regulations, and laws that are on the coast, which is the shrimping, the shellfish that the Coastal Resources Division manages. We also provide the public safety component on all of our DNR controlled properties. We conduct or participate in conducting the state-mandated hunter education, the new boater education requirements that are there, and our officers also provide a lot of information and education programs in general to the people that you serve too. You know, our overall goal with our enforcement efforts is voluntary compliance. And we do that through a lot of different ways, trying to be visible when we're out. We're interacting with landowners, with hunting clubs, try to support them. When our officers go out each day, they're supposed to be focusing on complaints they receive. And we expect our officers to be a part of their community. We have to do that to be successful. Conservation officers nationwide were considered to be the first community-oriented police officers. And that's because we have to do that to be successful, to have that support, because we're enforcing recreational time activities as a general rule. Our officers are asked to support other law enforcement agencies on a regular basis, and that's because of the unique equipment, unique skill set, and unique training that our officers have. We fit in the water and woods piece as far as public safety goes, what we call law enforcement off the pavement. We have about 200 allocated positions. We actually have 212 officers and 19 support staffs. 185 of those are field. When you think about it, we patrol about 12,000 miles of river, 500,000 acres of impounded waters. We have 100 linear miles of the coast, go up to about 200 miles off the coast when needed. The wildlife management areas, there's 110 of those, 10 public fishing areas, and of course 65 state parks and historic sites. Our officers work all the boating and hunting incidents that occur within the state. We have a special permits unit that issues 19 different types of permits that anywhere from a commercial related permit to an individual owning some type of animal. We have a lot of specialty teams that are housed within our law enforcement division, which includes K9s. We have 8 handlers. We have an aviation unit, which has 3 rotary assets, 3 pilots, and they support all the divisions of the department, whether it's from doing surveys to fighting forest fires, doing prescribed burns on the wildlife management areas, to search and rescue, such as our long line search and rescue capabilities. We have critical incident reconstruction teams which go back and recreate boating and hunting accidents. This takes specialized training, and that's mainly for serious injury or fatality type incidents. Several years ago, we developed what were our critical action teams, which do search and rescue, and this was because of the really natural disasters that were occurring around the nation. So we put specialized teams together with some equipment to be able to better respond to that. We also have an MOU with GEMA that when we're requested to do so, we'll be the lead for search and rescue when it comes to the water and woods components in our state. We also are part of several state law enforcement teams, from the state's counterterrorism task force, the child abduction response team, and the body recovery team. And all those places where we plug in, it's what we do every day, the water and the woods component when that's needed. There's two documents that kind of provide you some additional information. One is our fact sheet that you can review, that you may have some question, and also our strategic goal documents, which you can look at. That goes over 3 basic goals that we have. Our first piece with that is conservation law enforcement. I stress that with our officers. That's our core mission. That's what we focus on every day, even though they get pulled in additional directions to support other folks. Our education and outreach, we feel like that's really, really important for our whole agency to have support. And then our training, recruitment, and retention piece. I'll be looking forward to any questions you may have. Thank you.
Thank you, and thank you. I want to say something too, Colonel. It was 3 or 4 years ago that we lost one of your conservation rangers to an accident, and to our committee to let you know that most of your officers work solo on a lot of their cases, and so that relationship with your local governments is key. And so maybe you could let us know where your officers are stationed in case it's in one of our districts. We can kind of just be aware of that.
Sure.
So thank you.
Thank you.
And as we'll open up for questions in just a minute, and I don't know what your time right now is, 8:38, but as we've heard these presentations today, I want you to be aware that we complement or touch some of the other committees in the House. One is agriculture for sure. Another is game, fish, and parks. And then every now and then it might be transportation or something else like that, just because these are our natural resources. And so it's an extremely important committee. And Commissioner, back over to you.
That concludes our presentation, Madam Chair Lady. If we just welcome any questions.
Anyone have any questions? What I'll do is try and take questions from different individuals, but before we do that, so we have 3 representatives who've come in, and I'd love for them to introduce themselves to the committee. So let me do that first. Representative Thomas, if you will introduce yourself.
Yes, my name is Mabel Thomas, State Representative from Atlanta, Fulton County, District 56.
I'll get back to you in just a minute. And then Representative Nimmer.
Chad Nimmer, District 178.
From Central Georgia, and glad to be a part of this committee. Thank you.
For our existing committee members, we all say welcome, and I've got a couple of questions. Representative Mabel. Abel Mabel Thomas.
All right, thank you. Really, I don't have a question per se, but what I just want to go on record and saying is how much I appreciate and support the natural resources, and what I don't know if Commissioner knows, but my first job coming out of college was in natural resources, and so I know a lot about the department, and I appreciate the work over the years.
We thank you, and as my division directors all alluded to, we thank the entire General Assembly for their support. I don't know if Dan touched on it or not, but the license plate bill last year was critically important to us. We've seen good results of that, so specifically Representative Epps for doing that, but for the entire General Assembly for supporting it. So thank you.
Thank you. All right, and number 24 is next.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Commissioner, just want to express appreciation to you and all of your team for the work you guys do. And I especially want to note the in my opinion, seamless transition that y'all have effected with creating law enforcement into a separate division. That seems to have gone very well, and tip of the hat to everyone there. On that subject, can you talk about, I know past couple of years we talked about pay compression and career ladders and compensation for law enforcement officers. Can you address sort of what we've done there and what the results have been?
We were having a retention problem and morale problem, quite frankly, beforehand, and we're on the 3rd year of the 3-step pay increase that brings them up to a term people use, market midpoint, and that is our retention has gotten so much better, and morale as well. So it's been very positive. This will be the 3rd year to complete them, and I think I speak for all the officers in saying that we thank you, and they feel now that they're being compensated for the hours they put in. And, as you know, law enforcement, it's an all-in for the entire family. Those guys, they're not Monday through Friday. They're 24/7. So I appreciate what they do, and I thank the General Assembly for showing their appreciation for that new pay they're getting. So it's very positive.
Thank you. Number 17.
Hey, Madam Chairman. Want to thank.
When you want to go turkey hunting?
Hey, I'm ready, baby. I want to thank you first of all. I want to tell everyone.
He can't be still enough to hurt turkeys. I'm sorry, that just doesn't work.
I will be borrowing some of those Kevlar vests.
You told me I'll shoo them away. I don't want you to shoot those beautiful things. But I want to commend you first of all. Your wildlife division. Let all this committee know they came out to my district, and we had a large group to come out of the hunters. And they did a superb job. They were wonderful. I spent about 4 hours with us and answered a lot of questions. But I think you answered my main question about the tag. They were real concerned, and a lot of them had stopped using that tag because the money was going into the general funds. And now that it's going, they're doing a big campaign to get everybody to buy those wildlife tags. Because I'm glad that we did what we did there. But I appreciate what you did. The big question is they want us to do that baiting bill for up in North Georgia, the deer baiting. Now, there is a bill getting ready to be introduced, I understand, this week to allow your rangers, and I would like you to comment on that for me if you would. I understand it's just 1 or 2 words. We don't need to go through this big thing we had to do last time, but just to give y'all the right to open up areas for putting the corn out. Now, can you just comment on that, Mayor?
I love your optimism.
Just throw it out there, Chairman.
Yes, sir.
Oh, hold on.
Well, we just went through a very intensive year-long 10-year deer management plan that I and Director Forrester signed off on that addressed a ton of issues when it comes to deer management, that being one of them. A lot of discussion on that. We also just went through a public comment period for our 2015-2017 rules and regulations we're coming up with. The baiting bill will, as my understanding, has to be addressed for North Georgia baiting by the General Assembly.
Right.
We do have the authority in the department to do away with the north-south line, which is a totally separate issue. That's length of season as well as, most importantly. Had a lot of discussion on that through our town hall meetings the past couple of weeks. There seems to be complete consensus that the line, that we need 1 season. Now, where we end up, where we start and stop, there's about as many opinions as there are people at the meeting. So we're continuing, we're moving down a path of looking at that maybe as a board rule change. Obviously, if the General Assembly takes up the North Georgia baiting, that would, they could certainly take up that line, and we would not have to do that. I think Dan's sitting behind me, and he can correct me, but I think the consensus at our meetings around the state was that we need 1 season. Our rangers, our department would see that as a great thing because it's easier for us to manage with 1 season. We have to be conscientious of small game hunters. That was the reason that North Georgia stopped early to begin with. And so if we can find ways to mitigate that population of our customers, keep them happy, then that's what we're looking at. So.
Thank you.
Thank you. And I know that some of our members are having to leave, so I want to give you a quick reminder of next week. We'll be sending out our information. We're just in the 3-day posture next week, so we'll have our committee meeting on Wednesday back in the same room. I believe that's correct, right? It is? 506? It is. So we're back to 506. We normally meet in 606, but next week it's 506, and we'll be hearing from EPD. So we'll go back to our questions now, And my next one, number 23.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Just a comment to the colleagues on the committee. I want to put a plug in for the commissioner's budget this FY16. It contains a repair and reconstruction for a public fishing area that kind of straddles Representative Hardin's in my district, and this is an important benefit to the sports of Middle Georgia. It hadn't been available for about 4 years now because of some problems there, but it's highly used by handicapped sportsmen, and it's worthy of consideration, and I urge you to take a close look at it. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you. And number 3.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Not to be get away from the hunting and fishing crowd, which I've never been known to associate with.
They vote on you.
Yeah. that might be a conflict. But I had, amongst all the emails from bus drivers, I had one email from a golf course volunteer who said that program is changing, and I was just curious if that was a temporary change or if that was going to be permanent and statewide as far as the volunteers. Okay, what he said was there was an episode at a state golf course in Waycross that created a rule change for all the volunteers. Previously, what he was doing was working 8 hours for free and getting to play unlimited golf. And he said that's no longer an option, and I just didn't know if...
I'm not aware, so
okay.
I'll get with you after
all right,
the meeting.
good. Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you. And number 21.
Yeah, Madam Chair, thank you. And I alluded to this in the beginning, but I do, Commissioner, appreciate you and every one of your division people and your people in the field. And y'all have answered every question. I think I have probably contacted all divisions within there, but always have gotten tremendous service and appreciate what y'all do for the state and for our natural resources. And I do have a district that's very valuable with natural resources, and I appreciate all that y'all do.
Thank you. You probably got a feral hog or two down there too.
As a matter of fact, I'll be over shortly.
And so in conclusion for our committee, just be aware we'll be sending out notices for next Wednesday. We have our EPD folks in the audience, but that is a parallel agency that's under natural resources, but talk about federal law. We'll get into all of that next week. I think all of us share, it's a little bit overwhelming to realize all the responsibilities that fall under your charge and fall to this committee. So that's why I try and spend as much time as I can in the beginning to brief us all. And more importantly, you have all our contacts and that we need in case something comes up. But they are available to us. And so, again, I thank you, and I thank everyone. I know it's hard on Spud to leave the coast, but we appreciate everybody up here. And thank you, and we're adjourned.
Thank you.